My name is McKaila, and I'm an MA candidate in the Art History and Visual Studies department at the University of Victoria. I was thrilled to see this theme of AI and art at this year's symposium. I've worked in the cultural heritage sector for over a decade, mostly on the collection management side of these institutions. A large aspect of my experience has been developing and maintaining museum databases, including managing data, writing code and SQL scripts, and ultimately making collections more digitally accessible to everyone. I'm really eager to see how AI can be utilized by institutions to further accessibility and to keep this industry on the cutting edge of technology. Over the past decade, museums have been sites of experimentation and innovation in the field of AI, especially regarding marketing, visitor experiences, and exhibition development. Because of my line of work, I'm most interested in how this affects collections management and collections accessibility. While researching for this presentation, it became clear that AI and museum collections are not discussed too often within the sector here in British Columbia. Yes. On the other hand, the Museum of AI, for example, exists entirely as a virtual space with the occasional live pop-up exhibition or workshop in cities across the world. Other smaller scale projects include iMuse, based out of Turin, Italy, which is an app that enhances the way we engage with cultural institutions with a mission to redefine how visitors interact with museums. Research out of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and Harvard Art Museums have integrated AI into their collections databases in order to populate their metadata to improve their collection searchability. I wondered why these kinds of projects don't seem to be occurring in our institutions in British Columbia. In an attempt to answer this question, I created a survey about these topics and sent it to museums, galleries, and heritage sites across the entire province. I received over 100 responses from my colleagues in all regions of BC. I was quite surprised by some of the responses, which is why the topic of this presentation has ever so slightly shifted to address the points brought up in the survey. The survey asked 20 questions relating to AI and the cultural heritage industry in BC. However, we will only have time to discuss 4 of these questions today. The largest percentage of respondents, at 36.6%, described themselves as being part of curatorial or collections teams. The second highest classifications were IT data management and exhibitions production teams, both at 12.9%. Learning engagement were 11.8%, social media marketing were 10.8%, archives were 9.7%, and development and fundraising were 5.4%. These were classifications that I had listed out in the survey, but I also included a space where respondents could fill in another classification if these didn't fit, but nobody elected to fill in the blank. I asked if they currently use AI tools in their job. 33.3% said yes, 56.3% said no, and a surprising 10.3% said that they were unsure if they did or not. Some comments on this question said that they didn't actively use AI personally, however, they thought that their institution may be using AI functionalities. Most of the respondents that said yes were in IT data management, social media marketing, development fundraising, and learning engagement departments. Most of the respondents that said no were in exhibitions production and curatorial or collections departments. My next question to those who answered no was, why don't you use AI in your job? Once again, I listed some answers to choose from, but left an empty space for the respondents to fill in other options. A surprising 27.3% of respondents think that AI tools are not relevant to their jobs, with the next most popular options tied at 18.2%, being that they don't know how to use it or they don't have capacity to learn right now. 16.4% of people were concerned with ethics and privacy, and 14.5% think that the tools are too much work to set up. 5.5% do not think that AI tools are useful, which is awesome for this conference. But remember that the majority of these respondents were from the exhibitions production and curatorial collections departments. Since the responses were about folks being unsure of the relevancy of AI to their jobs or uncertainty about how to use it, I asked if they would be interested in receiving resources and workshops related to their jobs and AI. 99% said yes, and 1% said no. Because of this enthusiastic response, I will compile a list of resources to send back to the respondents, some of which I'll discuss with you now. One of the most useful resources in this area is the AI Museum Planning Toolkit, published in 2020 and developed by the Museums and AI Network out of the UK. This project brought together academics from the University of London, the Pratt Institute, and museum professionals from both the UK and United States to research the challenges and opportunities that AI technologies can offer. A toolkit was developed to serve as a starting point for museums interested in working with AI. The introduction discusses why the industry could use AI, its ethical implications, off-the-shelf AI tools to use, bias management, brand washing, and critical technology discourse. There are 3 case studies included from the National Gallery of London, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the American Museum of Natural History, both based in New York. They include AI tools used to analyze visitor surveys, forecasting models and visitor data, and creating more searchable collection databases. The toolkit also outlines an AI capabilities framework, as well as an ethics workflow for anyone to fill in. Using these elements outlined in the toolkit, let's look at an example of a museum utilizing these techniques within their collection today. Harvard Art Museums is using AI to categorize, tag, describe, annotate, and humanize its collections. They have already collected over 53 million machine-generated descriptions and tags. According to their website, their process begins by giving AI various generators an image of an artwork. They then ask it to describe what it sees with no other context, just the image itself. Since the computer lacks context or artistic knowledge beyond what is depicted in each image, the machine's interpretations of the artworks lean closer to reflecting the public rather than experts. By using an AI's perspective, browsing and searching art becomes more accessible and more intuitive to non-museum goers. As an example, I typed music into the search grid. As you can see written at the top of the page, the search yielded over 41,000 occurrences of music found on over 38,000 images. I really enjoy the statement on this page that says, results displayed in order of confidence determined by AI. There are pages and pages and pages of results ranked in order of the AI's certainty that these images contain music. I randomly selected this image, titled Musica, after 1565. Immediately, we can see very clearly the distinction between human-generated data and machine-generated data, which is an important point mentioned in the toolkit that I brought up earlier. The human-generated data would have been inputted by a cataloger, collections manager, or curator. This section includes the object number, artist, title, date, classification, dimensions, inscriptions, markings, acquisition information, and use permissions. Most of this type of data could only be known by a human because it is specific information and contexts which exist outside of the image itself. Under the machine-generated sections, we can see a series of tags created by an AI program. Some of these include people, music, instrument, and facial hair, along with the percentage of certainty of each term on the right-hand side. Interestingly, the AI was able to determine that this image is an engraving. We also see a color analysis, which isn't the most exciting here because it's an engraving, but you can click on these colors, and then you'll be brought to pages of other images with a similar color story. Not all of the images in the collection have AI-generated captions available, but this one does. In February of this year, Azure OpenAI created the following caption to describe this image. Quote, "This image depicts a group of classical figures engaged in making music with various instruments of the period. One figure is playing a large stringed instrument similar to a harp. Another is holding a lute, while the third is seated and appears to be playing a keyboard instrument. A range of other instruments include a lute, a violin, wind instruments, and sheet music are also pictured, suggesting a rich musical setting. The clothing and accessories of the figures are reminiscent of classical antiquity. The scene is contained within a detailed etching that includes a Latin inscription at the bottom, which suggests an intellectual or scholarly context to the portrayal of music. Even though some of the information here is incorrect, for example, there is not a harp in the image, the overall caption is accurate enough to be used as a very basic starting point by a member of the public to delve deeper into research about the artwork. Again, this section is very clearly demarcated as being AI generated. As mentioned on the Harvard Museum website, this program also completes facial analyses that predict gender, age, and emotion. To showcase this function, I found this advertisement for toothpaste from around 1933. Here, the AI program AHVS recognition thinks that the figure on the right is between the ages of 26 to 42, is 70% or 73% female, is 98.9% happy, 0.8% angry, and 0.1% surprised. The same program thinks that the figure on the left is between the ages of 32 and 48, is 99% male, is 81% happy, 13% angry, and so on. Here is an AI-generated image of technology in museums. As we have seen from examples drawn from the Harvard Art Museum's case study, as well as this image, AI usage in this respect is not perfect. The programs are still learning, but what they can tell us is still useful data. Attaching accessible terminology as metadata to images in your collection makes the collection as a whole more searchable and user-friendly. Today, from Anthony Cross, we experimented with AI as facilitating the final output and creating spaces for structured interactions. From Kate Armstrong, we posited that every AI is imperfect, and we don't know what a perfect model could look like. And from Dominic Lopez, by way of David Chalmers, it is both possible and probable that we're all NPCs in a simulation. But we have no good reason to be worried about that. So what does all of this mean for the future of AI in museum collections in British Columbia? From my very early research into this topic, the majority of institutions here are not currently using it in their collections. The survey results tell me that folks don't know where to begin, don't see how it's useful, and have decades of data backlog ahead of them before they can even get started. However, by examining these case studies I mentioned today, there are tools out there to guide institutions so they don't need to start from scratch. I have so many more interesting data results from this survey that I hope to share in the future. And for now, I will provide these institutions with some preliminary resources on AI so they can start their journey to digital collection accessibility. Thank you.